Welcome back to the Crypto Intellect, beautiful people, moneymakers, XRP family all around the world. We need to talk because things are getting absolutely wild right now. XRP holders, this could be one of those moments that people look back on months from now and say, that was the turning point. Right now, XRP is hovering around that $1.36 area, and I know a lot of people are frustrated. I know people are tired of the sideways movement. I know some of you are sitting there thinking, when is XRP finally going to wake up? But listen carefully, because underneath the surface, behind the boring price action, something massive is happening with Ripple right now. We're talking about institutional money, Wall Street integration, global liquidity rails, and potentially trillions of dollars flowing through systems that Ripple is now plugging into. That's why today's title is not clickbait. Ripple just connected itself to something enormous, and whether the market reacts immediately or not, the infrastructure is being built right in front of our eyes. The scary thing for bears is that most retail investors still are not paying attention yet. Now, before we get deeper into the XRP situation, we also have to talk about the macro environment because everything is connected right now. The stock market yesterday was all over the place. The S&P 500 looked decent, the Nasdaq looked okay, but under the surface there were stocks absolutely exploding. Some assets were running 15%, 20%, even higher in a single trading session. That's why I keep telling people that you cannot only look at one asset class anymore. You have to understand the broader market because opportunities are everywhere. Crypto traders are watching crypto, stock traders are watching stocks, but the smart money is watching everything together. We also got major developments surrounding a potential Iran and US agreement, and the market immediately reacted to that possibility. Reports were circulating about an immediate ceasefire framework, protection of infrastructure, freedom of navigation in the Persian Gulf, and gradual sanction relief. Whether the final agreement happens today, tomorrow, or next week, the point is simple. Global markets are reacting to every headline right now, and crypto is not isolated from any of this. At the same time, we have another major situation developing in Washington that XRP holders absolutely need to monitor closely. The Clarity Act conversation is becoming more intense, but there are also concerns now about timing. The Senate is going home until June, and multiple bills are competing for floor time. That means crypto legislation is now entering a political traffic jam. Some people were hoping for a clean July 4th announcement where lawmakers would push through major crypto regulation and finally give the industry a clear framework. But now, that timeline is becoming less certain. And listen, I always try to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm not here to just hype you up every single day pretending everything is perfect. There are risks here. Delays matter. Regulatory uncertainty matters. But what's important is that crypto regulation is still being discussed at the highest levels of government. XRP remains directly connected to that conversation because Ripple has been at the center of regulatory battles for years now. So even if the timeline slips a little bit, the fact that crypto regulation is becoming unavoidable is still a long-term positive for the industry. The overall crypto market sentiment right now honestly feels exhausted. The fear and greed index has cooled off, volatility has slowed down, and people are getting bored again. You can feel it all over social media. Engagement is lower. Retail investors are distracted. Some people have already moved on emotionally because price action has not delivered the fireworks they expected. But if you've been around markets long enough, you know this is usually where important positioning happens. The loud excitement comes later. The institutional accumulation often happens during the boring periods when nobody cares. And that's why I keep telling you guys not to judge everything purely based on price action week to week. If XRP was suddenly sitting at $2 tomorrow, would people feel relieved? Sure. But would their lives completely change overnight? Probably not. The real game is understanding what is being built underneath the surface before the crowd wakes up again. That's the difference between chasing trends and actually understanding markets. Another massive story that people are not talking about enough is quantum computing. The Trump administration is reportedly investing billions into quantum-related companies, including Intel, IBM, and major chip manufacturers. This is becoming a serious national priority. Now, naturally, whenever quantum computing comes up, people immediately panic about crypto security. You start seeing articles everywhere saying Bitcoin could eventually become vulnerable, or that traditional encryption could be cracked by advanced quantum systems. And yes, these are legitimate conversations. But I also think a lot of the fear gets exaggerated because technology evolves on both sides. Cryptography keeps evolving too. Security protocols become stronger over time. Developers adapt. Networks upgrade. XRP, by the way, has often been discussed as being in a stronger position regarding future quantum resistance compared to some older systems. So while quantum computing is definitely something the crypto industry must take seriously, I don't personally believe it's the end of crypto. If anything, it could push blockchain technology into an entirely new phase of security innovation over the next decade. I was actually thinking recently about how long some of us have been around this market. Back in university, I remember hearing about Bitcoin during cryptography discussions, and at the time, nobody really understood what it would become. Most people were broke students. Nobody had extra money sitting around to throw into digital assets. Looking back now, of course, everyone says, I wish I bought Bitcoin then. But hindsight is always easy. The point is that every cycle creates another opportunity that feels uncertain in the moment. XRP right now reminds me a lot of those periods where sentiment is weak, interest is low, and people start doubting whether anything exciting will happen again. Yet historically, those are often the moments that set the stage for the next major move. Markets have a way of exhausting people emotionally before they finally reward patience. That doesn't guarantee XRP explodes tomorrow, but it explains why smart investors continue paying attention even when mainstream excitement disappears. Now let's get to the story that has the XRP community buzzing today, because this is where things become extremely interesting. Ripple's institutional integration efforts continue expanding, and reports are circulating that Ripple Prime has plugged into a network connected to roughly $7 trillion in assets under management through EDX Markets. Think about what that means for a second. EDX Markets is backed by some of the biggest names on Wall Street, including Citadel, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and Goldman Sachs. This is not some random crypto startup operating out of a basement. This is serious institutional infrastructure. Ripple integrating deeper into these systems means XRP is positioning itself closer and closer to the financial rails that large institutions actually use. And this is exactly what XRP supporters have been talking about for years. While retail investors were obsessing over meme coins and short-term hype cycles, Ripple kept building relationships, payment systems, liquidity infrastructure, and enterprise-level integrations. That doesn't always create instant price explosions, but over time it builds something much more durable. What's fascinating right now is how disconnected the price action feels from the underlying developments. XRP is not exactly flying right now. It's consolidating, moving sideways, frustrating traders, and making people impatient. But if you go back and study previous XRP cycles, this kind of behavior is actually not unusual at all. XRP historically spends long periods doing absolutely nothing, and then suddenly moves aggressively when the market least expects it. I remember back in 2024, when XRP interest was incredibly low, videos barely got views. People stopped talking about the asset. Sentiment was terrible after the SEC appeal headlines. XRP dropped hard, confidence disappeared, and many people gave up emotionally. Yet eventually, the narrative shifted. Momentum returned. Suddenly everybody cared again. Markets are emotional like that. People become interested after the move already happens. Very few people stay engaged during the boring accumulation phases, which is why these periods can feel psychologically exhausting. The Clarity Act could still end up becoming a major catalyst if momentum returns later this year. Regulatory clarity is one of the biggest missing pieces for institutional crypto adoption in the United States. Large financial entities want rules. They want legal structure. They want predictability. And once those frameworks become clearer, that could unlock an entirely different level of participation in the digital asset market. XRP stands in a very unique position because Ripple has already spent years fighting regulatory battles directly. If crypto legislation finally progresses meaningfully, XRP could benefit disproportionately from that clarity because the market already associates Ripple with compliance, institutional use cases, and cross-border financial systems. Again, nothing is guaranteed, but you can absolutely see why many investors are still watching XRP closely despite the slow short-term price action. Another thing catching attention right now is activity on the XRP network itself. Reports show that thousands of new wallets were added recently, marking one of the strongest spikes in growth this year. That matters because wallet growth can sometimes act as a leading indicator before larger market moves. It suggests new participants are entering the ecosystem, even while mainstream attention remains muted. And honestly, who do you think is accumulating during periods like this? Usually not retail investors. Retail typically arrives later after momentum has already exploded. During quieter periods, it's often institutions, larger investors, or people with longer time horizons who quietly position themselves. That doesn't mean XRP is guaranteed to surge immediately, but it explains why smart money pays attention to on-chain activity instead of only staring at hourly price candles all day. What I appreciate about this community is that many of you continue paying attention even when XRP is not trendy. Most people outside this space are not thinking about crypto every day. They're focused on work, family, daily responsibilities, bills, and regular life. They only become interested in investing when headlines become exciting again. That's human nature. But the people watching videos like this consistently are different because you're trying to understand the market before the crowd arrives. You're studying narratives, legislation, institutional adoption, and macro conditions instead of only reacting emotionally after something pumps. That mindset alone already separates you from the average participant who simply follows hype cycles without understanding what they're investing in. At the same time, everybody approaches investing differently. Some people love buying during fear because they believe calm periods create opportunity. Others prefer waiting for confirmation and momentum before entering positions. There are investors who only buy assets once they're already trending upward because they want strength confirmed first. One investor I followed years ago used to say he preferred entering on the second floor and exiting at the penthouse, meaning he didn't care about catching exact bottoms. He wanted proof of momentum before scaling in. And honestly, there's logic to that strategy too. Different methods work for different personalities. The important thing is having a plan and understanding your own risk tolerance instead of blindly copying influencers online who pretend they know exactly what the market will do tomorrow. That's another reason why I always avoid telling people directly to buy, sell, or hold specific assets. Nobody knows exactly what headlines will hit next week. Nobody knows what decisions governments will make or how markets will react emotionally in the short term. One unexpected geopolitical event, one surprise regulatory announcement, or one major institutional move can completely shift sentiment overnight. So instead of pretending certainty exists, I think it's more valuable to focus on understanding probabilities, narratives, and long-term trends. Right now, the probability of institutional crypto adoption continuing to grow still looks strong. The probability of blockchain integration into traditional finance still looks strong. And Ripple continuing to plug deeper into major financial systems absolutely fits within that larger trend. Something else people are underestimating is how much Wall Street interest in crypto continues growing behind the scenes. The CME XRP futures products have reportedly seen enormous trading volume already, and institutional infrastructure keeps expanding. Futures markets matter because they allow larger players to gain exposure, hedge positions, and participate with tools they're already comfortable using. That's part of how traditional finance slowly absorbs new asset classes over time. First comes infrastructure, then comes liquidity. Then eventually broader adoption follows. XRP becoming more deeply integrated into those systems is a very important development, even if short-term traders are frustrated by price consolidation today. And honestly, sometimes the quiet periods are where conviction gets tested the hardest. It's easy to feel like a genius when everything is pumping and every headline is bullish. It's much harder to stay focused during slow markets when engagement drops, excitement fades, and price action becomes frustrating. But historically, these quieter stretches are often where the strongest foundations are built emotionally and financially. The people who survive long-term in investing are usually not the people chasing every shiny object. They're the people who remain patient enough to let larger trends play out over time, while still staying flexible enough to adapt when conditions change. I also think people forget how fast sentiment can flip in crypto. One major announcement, one regulatory breakthrough, one explosive candle, and suddenly everybody comes rushing back. YouTube views spike, social media explodes, mainstream media starts covering XRP again, and retail investors suddenly remember crypto exists. We've seen it happen before. Markets move in cycles emotionally just as much as financially. Right now, we are clearly in a slower emotional phase, but underneath that surface, infrastructure continues expanding. Ripple continues building. Institutional relationships continue growing. And whether people want to admit it or not, XRP is becoming increasingly difficult for the financial world to ignore completely. So as we close this out today, remember this: the biggest developments often happen quietly before the crowd notices them. Ripple plugging into systems connected to trillions in assets is not a small story. Regulatory conversations in Washington are not small stories. Institutional XRP products gaining traction are not small stories. The market may not be reacting dramatically right this second, but the pieces continue moving into place. That doesn't guarantee instant riches, and it doesn't mean there won't be volatility ahead. But it does mean the XRP story is far from over. In many ways, it feels like the next chapter may just be getting started. If you're still here, still learning, still paying attention during the slow periods, you're already ahead of most people. Thank you for spending time with me here on the Crypto Intellect. Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button for the algorithm, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, my friends, let's make a lot of money.